The Sixth Parliament's 5-year term is coming to an end, but it will operate until the eve of the general elections. Having been appointed in 2019, the Sixth Parliament has passed a number of controversial bills, the latest being the National Health Insurance that has received mixed reaction from South Africans. I am joined by Prof. Andre Duvenhage, a political analyst from North-West University, to discuss the work of the Sixth Parliament as it bows out of office. Prof, thank you so much for joining us this evening on News at Prime. I guess there will be people who will be in charge for now, but what does this all mean now that we're going to the elections and the Sixth Administration has coming to an end for the National Assembly?
Good evening. Yes, indeed, there are mechanisms provided for in the Constitution. The Sixth Parliament is coming to an end, and then we enter a transitional period. We will have the election, then the election result, and then there's a time for the establishment of a new government. Now, in the past, this was relatively easy because there were clear majorities on a national level, as is in the case in all 9 provinces, with one province going to the DA, the rest to the ANC. But as we have seen with the local government election of 2021, we ended up with something like about 70 plus hung councils where there's no absolute majority. In that case, there will be time for groupings to meet each other to see if they can bring together or establish a coalition that can achieve the necessary majorities where necessary. And currently, if we are taking the surveys seriously, there is the possibility of coalitions on a national level where constantly the ANC support in the last 6 months were measured under 45% and as low as 38, 39%. And then it is also clear that we will have an absolute majority problem in both KZN as well as Gauteng, and maybe also in the Western Cape, if the Democratic Alliance is not going to achieve an absolute majority. Now, in these cases, there are time for the establishment of government. And in these cases, there's a transitional period, and within the transitional period, a new government on the respective levels need to be established.
So what does this mean? Because we're talking about some of the bills that we've been seeing. I mean, yesterday, for one, there was the GBV femicide bill that was signed by the president, as well as the NPA amendment bill, which was signed by the president. And of course, in recent weeks as well, we saw that NHI bill being signed as well. Was this all done because the National Assembly and Parliament won't be able to continue its duties once the Sixth Administration comes to an end?
I think there are basically 2 reasons, 2 main reasons. There may be more reasons than the 2 main reasons, but the one is that the Sixth Administration used legislation in order to create an environment to organize and mobilize support. In other words, they are using populist legislation to mobilize the voters on their side. That is one of the reasons. The other reason is, coming out of this election, maybe there's not a majority on the side of the ANC nationally, but it's going to be difficult to change the legislation. So there's also an argument in terms of continuity, arguing that any new government will find it difficult and to change the legislation. And secondly, it is expected that the ANC will end up as the majority party, probably in a worst case, need some coalition partners, but they will be bigger and then they can continue with their business, although they may be in a weaker position nationally and maybe on some provincial levels.
And if it goes the other way around, and we talk about what you were discussing earlier about the possibility and likelihood of coalition governments at a provincial, but also more importantly, at a national level, what does this mean for the 7th administration when it comes to passing bills and signing new legislation as well? Will it be more difficult in that state of a coalition government nationally?
Well, when you have a majority government, it is relatively simple to pass legislation. You take it through the legislative processes, protocols and procedures, and you voted it in with your majority. But the moment you enter coalition politics, it is becoming a lot more sophisticated, a lot more complicated, because you need to bring in your partners on the deal. They would like to have their input. Maybe they want some executive positions like Minister of Finance or whatever the case may be. So this is complicating politics in many ways. And we have seen with the majority of metros where there's coalitions, there were serious challenges with regard first to political stability or patterns of instability rather. And then secondly, there were problems in terms of taking decisions, an inability to pass a budget speech, an inability to make decisive decisions with regard to service delivery. And thus far, our track record with reference to coalition politics is not a very healthy one. And the reason is that we have a one-party dominant tradition. We had it even before 1994 and under the ANC government, and now we are in a phase of change. I have no doubt that we are going to see major changes in the political reconfiguration on both national and the majority of provincial levels. So we can expect change. Coalition is going to be the name of the game, but it means more complicated, more sophisticated techniques you need in order to get decisions. You need leadership. You need certain values. For example, you need to accommodate your opponent to a certain level. And tolerance is very critical. And thus far, these values, to a large extent, was absent on a local level in the metros where we had coalition politics.
Prof, before I let you go, is this something perhaps that voters should also be cognizant of come Wednesday, the 29th of May as well, when we look at those patterns of instability that have been created at a local government level? That do we necessarily want to see that kind of government at a provincial or national level? But then also voters are kind of left between a rock and a hard place, because you either go for the bigger, older parties and have a majority party, as we've had in our history, but be dissatisfied with where we find ourselves in a country, or try your luck with another new party or an alternative party, and then we find ourselves in coalitions which may not work either. So is this something that a voter should be considering as well?
Well, I think definitely voters should consider it. But if I can analyze the problem from an academic perspective, in order for a democracy to function in a proper way, you need a certain level of stability within the state, within society. And this stability is unfortunately not within our society. We have seen high levels of social instability, economic instability, political instability. And these factors are working against democratic principles. Now, the problem is not with the workers, the voters. The voters should have had the right to vote for a certain policy framework. But unfortunately, in a way, the state is failing the citizens. And that is why we are talking about concepts like the failed state or the weak state. So we have a problem in terms of the state as state. and this is influencing our form of government, namely democracy. But I think the voters are not going to look at this on a very sophisticated academic level. I think they are going to go for the party that they believe is best. I'm seeing that about, I think some people say 8%, others say it's more. People are not yet decided in which direction they are going to vote. And I think this may have a major impact. But I think we are in for higher levels of political instability in the post-election environment. And that is where we need strong leadership, leadership that can take us forward, that has the ability to think bigger than the interest of a party alone. And I hope that the election will produce that type of leadership that can take us forward, as was the case in the build-up to the 1994 elections.
And stability is exactly what we need. Prof, thank you so much for joining us this evening and sharing those insights with us. We look forward to seeing those results come 29 May. That's Prof. Andre Duvenhage, who's a political analyst from the North-West University.